And then I'll do this one. All right, Mr. Mayor, we're ready.
Very good. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. It is Wednesday, July 21st, 2021. It is 5:35 p.m. and the City Council of the City of Edina is reconvening in person. This is the first night we've been back in business for well over a year in person at City Hall. Tonight, we've got a work session preceding the council meeting that we're going to commence now, and this work session involves the 2022-2023 budget and our budget work plan process, and Don Durham and Scott Neal are going to make the presentation. We're going to get a recap on the council retreat that we had early in the spring, and then the 2022-2023 preliminary budget will be advanced again for consideration. So, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. So what you're going to see tonight.
You've missed roll call.
Oh.
It's first time.
Yeah, thank you. Calling the work session to order. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Anderson,
Here.
Councilmember Jackson,
Here.
Councilmember Pierce,
Here.
Councilmember Staunton,
Here.
Mayor Hepburn.
Here. You think I could read an agenda, wouldn't you?
The other thing you're gonna notice tonight because you're together in a live setting, you don't have to do a roll call for every vote. You can go back and do.
Right.
Thanks for making me feel better.
It's my job. What we're gonna do tonight with you is give you your first look at the numbers, not just the kind of the work plan that underpins our budget, but some actual data, some numbers that have been put together by Don and his team with the assistance of all of our management staff. We don't need an action from you tonight, but we're interested in some of your feedback. If you have any feedback tonight, this is our first meeting where we kind of marry work planning and financials together. We'll do this again later in August and that meeting these meetings tend to get more important as we get closer to the certification of our preliminary levy that happens in September. So we've got some room to make some changes in this and give you a sense of what we're going to do tonight. This is just I think a graphic that you've seen before that tries to summarize our budget. So our consolidated budget, all the money we spend in a year on programs, debt, personnel, construction, et cetera, $131 million in 2021. That's broken down into three distinct areas: governmental funds, enterprise funds, and internal service funds on the far right. And you can see what falls within each one of those. What we typically spend the most time on is the general fund, which is $49 million. So you can see that it's a third of our total funding. So 2/3 of our funding really is outside of the general fund. It's debt, capital, all of our liquor, utilities, park enterprise, et cetera. Our estimated market value of Edina continues to grow. It hit sort of its low spot in 2013 and has been on a growth trajectory since then. We were 13.3 billion in 2021. And 2022, it will be 13.8 billion, fifth largest municipal tax base in Minnesota, behind Minneapolis, St. Paul, Bloomington, Plymouth now, and Edina. Again, our timeline, and if you remember, the timeline for our budget begins with you. It begins with our retreat, where we talk about what you want city government to do, what you want us to accomplish in the upcoming 2-year process. That's always the place where our budgeting process starts. And we are in the June 21st, so we haven't made, we don't have a lot of milestones accomplished at this point, but this is an important one tonight. And you can see where we kind of descend from there. August 17th is where we give you kind of the full budget picture, at least the city manager's proposed budget. September 9th is a Thursday, kind of a rare Thursday city council meeting. But that will be where we talk about the HRA levy. And we want the council to adopt the preliminary levy, which is the highest levy that we can set for 2022 at the September 21st city council meeting. I have to adopt it that night.
Yeah, right. And as you can see, there's plenty of room in this calendar for additional discussion following the adoption of the preliminary levy.
We talk about our budget process being a biennial process because we spend our odd numbered years preparing for the subsequent 2-year period, the 2022-2023 period. And then in even numbered years, we look at our capital funding, so our CapEx 5-year plan. So we are in an odd year now, and this is the budget timeframe that we are planning. Vision Edina, we have a couple of large kind of vision documents or 50,000 foot documents that we use to plan our spending for the upcoming 2-year period. Vision Edina is that one where a few years ago we had a number of people that gathered and tried to project a future for Edina. That was an important driver for our comprehensive plan and for our CIP. That drives our work plans, our budget work plan, and I think we're going to take a look at our budget work plan now. Our 2-year budget plan drives annual, so there are annual department work plans, and then there are even individual work plans that drive from that. And of course, our annual board and commission work plans, all kind of coming up and supporting the council's direction of what you want to accomplish in our 2-year budget. So our goals, objectives, strategies, this is our budget and our work plan for the upcoming year, along in the areas of strong foundation, reliable service, livable city, and better together. Those 4 pillars that we've been working with for the last 4 years. So our budget work plan under the strong foundation piece, this is where we are today. This is an area, of course, we want we need council support for. So I want you to take some time to make sure we've covered the right large items. So fire stations at the top of the list. Fire stations haven't been at the top of our list the last time we put this together. Street financing, we're talking about starting that. So we're talking about the impact of that, fiscal impact of that this year. We're going to talk about that tonight for the upcoming 2-year period, and then the policy actions on your council agenda for tonight. A lift station, which we're going to introduce you to, and when we do our infrastructure tour, roof replacements, GIS, technology, security. Under reliable service, trying to continue to evaluate what we learned about ourselves in the post-pandemic, for the post-pandemic period, reassess our city hall needs. We did a city hall needs analysis immediately before the pandemic. It's not quite as useful as it was then. And Art Center is a big one. We talked a lot about Art Center in the spring. We've got some kind of exciting Art Center opportunities right now that we're evaluating. And new elections, we're continuing to talk to the Edina schools about election ideas. Green building policy, climate change, affordable housing. There's a big project coming up on our portion of the lake that we'll talk about soon. And then considering, we've asked the Parks and Recreation Commission for a couple of years to take a deep look at alternative funding mechanisms. And they're going to have a big opportunity for an alternative next fall when we have a local option sales tax referendum. Finally, better together. This is where we continue our race and equity work and the implementation plan. Again, looking at post-pandemic community engagement. What does that look like? How is it different than when we had pre-pandemic? We'll plan for our board and commission diversity strategy, and of course our 2023 biennial quality of life surveys just around the corner. Don, this is Don Uram's final city budget, kind of like the culmination of many years of professional experience, and this is it.
This is it. I don't really want it to end with an increase in the levy of 9.99%.
You don't?
It wasn't, but it accomplishes a lot of things. And as Scott mentioned earlier, we'll walk through what the budget will accomplish. So these are the preliminary numbers that were put together based on input from all of the department heads. as well as my staff who kind of crunch the numbers. We work closely with Bob downstairs in the assessing department on property values, tax capacities, and that sort of thing. So as you can see, the general fund for 22 is going up just over 9%, and we'll talk about the reasons for that. And but further down, you can see that, debt service is leveled off, and this is the property tax debt service, so that's leveled off. The construction fund has gone up primarily because we've included $950,000 for the street reconstruction program, as we discussed during the street task force. And the HRA, excuse me, the HRA levy is just going up 3%. So what this budget proposal does, in 2022, like I said, it includes money to start the street reconstruction process. It also includes $500,000 for increases in service levels, primarily to add additional staff in the areas that are needed. And then the one item that we want to talk tonight about, and Andrew's going to lead that, is the discussion about potential to move Centennial Lakes Park into the general fund, and the reasons for us to consider that. So what's driving the increases for 2022? First off, 70% of our budget is wages and benefits. That's the largest portion, and for 22, that's up 4%. That number will continue to be adjusted as we have more information. Secondly, 3.4% internal service fund charges, service level changes, and then everything else. Service level changes really are the new position requests, because we're adding additional services or improving them. All other charges include commodities, contractual services, all those miscellaneous things that we do. The street reconstruction levy of $950,000 adds 2.26% to the budget. Equipment levy is going up a little bit, and the HRA levy is going up, but really small dollar amounts. So that's what gets us to this point.
I would point out that the 4% increase on wages and benefits doesn't mean employees are getting a 4% raise. It means that just the cost of those people, their projected cost of living increase and increase in their insurance benefits and retirement benefits, that's where we're projecting that to happen.
It would be helpful to know what that has been in the past.
What that number has been in the past? Okay.
So the median value home, in 2021, the median value home paid about $136 per month to fund city services. The median value home in 2021 is $551,300. Our estimated market value has gone up about 3.7%. The new median value home is $571,800, which is a fairly substantial increase that we've seen for this year compared to the past couple of years. So with the property tax increase, the levy going up about 9.9%, the impact on the median value home is a 6.5% increase in city taxes, which is an increase of about $105 a year, or less than $9 a month. So their payment would be $144 per month in city taxes as the budget's proposed. So here's a good thing, and this is what we talked about previously with the Southdale 2 KIF district being decertified at the end of this year. That added $6.8 million back to the tax base. So with that addition, we were able to keep the impact of the median value home at $105. Adding to that impact really is the $20,000 increase in market value. If the median value home would have gone up, say 3% or some such other number, the overall impact would be fairly minor. Without Southdale 2, that tax impact would be $189. So a fairly substantial benefit to the community with that TIF district being certified. And with the HR, we talked about this. There's a certain percentage that we can levy based on our market value. The HRA levy is separate from the city. The HRA levies must be used for those items listed in the HRA Act. And as we're proposing, is $237,000. That's a $9 impact. We are far below what we could levy from an HRA perspective and still meet the state statute. The median value home, this is a chart that we look at every year. And this just shows that the increases, how it happens over time. You can see the lower green bar is the city tax, and from 2012 at just over $1,000, it went up $700 over the past 10 years. The overall taxes is a little bit higher. That includes Hennepin County, the school districts, other taxing jurisdictions, and that sort of thing. But you can also see how our median value home has increased. Now, 2013 was the low point at $396,000. We're at $570,000. Fairly substantial increase over the years.
So I have a question about deconstructing what a median value home is. Is this a good time to do that?
Sure.
So how much of that is the value of the land and, an asset going up? How much is it the building permits that were issued in 2020 when everybody was home? And then how much of it is the tear down and redevelopment driving that? Can we break that down?
We do have that number. I don't have it with me, but we can get that to you.
Okay,
I
yeah.
think it's
I'd like to-
primarily driven by new home construction.
Yeah.
Okay, I'd be interested to know that.
Well, do you mean, Carol, the difference about what's, you said deconstructing it, do you mean how does something go from 551 to 571? How did the median grow? Or how did the tax base grow? Do you mean the 13
The
point?
median would be driven by the tax
Yeah.
base. So I guess, I'm thinking of my home, how much has it gone up in value? And if, is my tax going to go up, proportionately? Or is it being driven by my neighbors? And I think part of it is sort of a public discussion because we do, people complain about redevelopment, but then it also helps protect our taxes, keep our taxes low. So I just kind of like to get a sense of what the overall single family home
Can do, yeah, we can do that.
changes and where, where the drivers are on that.
Yeah. We can do that.
Yeah, so our city assessor, Bob Wilson, produces an assessment report every year.
Okay.
So that's something I can certainly forward to you
That'd
and
be
other
great.
council members if you're interested.
Okay, thank you.
And this one I'll turn over to Andrea. So Andrea, our financial analyst, does a lot of work in the enterprise funds, and Centennial Lakes is part of that. She can talk about the situation we're in with the Centennial Lakes Park.
Yeah, hi, everybody. Rolling Centennial Lakes Park into the general fund has been on our work plan and part of our goals. We talked about it last budgeting cycle, so we're coming to you this budgeting cycle to talk about it some more. It is an enterprise fund, so the official definition of an enterprise fund is where we charge user fees. It has to be an enterprise fund if you're trying to recover your costs. So obviously Centennial Lakes Park, we're not charging enough to recover our cost. We have the paddle boats and the ice skating, we have park maintenance fees there too. So all that covers about 59% of the cost. Net, it would be rolling $500,000 into the general fund. So we have some options. One thought is we could try to offset that with, right now, liquor obviously subsidizes Centennial Lakes. So one option would be that liquor sends money into the general fund to offset that for the next couple of years, a year or two. That's up for discussion.
Yeah, I think at this point, what we're really looking for from the council is, based on the situation with the enterprise fund, does it make sense to do this? And, if it does, or you'd like to consider it, we would put together a plan to finance it so that there's going to be some tax levy impact. We'll figure out a plan to minimize that tax levy impact. And come back with the council.
So this,
The reason you're suggesting making this conversion based on the fact that the trust fund that was set up to help manage Centennial Lakes is exhausted or close to exhaustion.
It is actually, yeah, and that's what the next couple slides kind of talk to. So this is the annual budgeted cash flow for each of the park and rec enterprises. Centennial Lakes Park is actually the last one there that is a little bit hidden. So we all know some of the enterprises have positive cash flow annually, some of them don't have positive cash flow. And the ones that are negative are the ones that are taking our liquor subsidy. So right now, the big takers of that are the Art Center, the Arena, and Centennial Lakes Park. Edinburgh Park has had a fund balance, so that they've just been working that down. But that would be, according to budget, close to zero at the end of 2023.
And part of why this is, like our business has suffered like every other business with the pandemic. You know, most of our operations were closed or we were operating in a shoestring. And while some expenses decreased, not all expenses decreased, and we weren't generating any revenue, so we were using fund balance and cash balances. So it's kind of, this whole pandemic thing has accelerated what was inevitably gonna happen. We're just there sooner than we.
I think the thing that we're seeing too, on that slide, well, maybe that's a good slide too, but the operating subsidies of a couple of these park facilities have grown faster than the rate of growth of our liquor profits. And so we're trying to head off a situation where if we don't do anything with this, pretty soon our liquor profits will be entirely consumed by Centennial Lakes Park and then Borough Park together. And those are two facilities that are probably better fits for the general fund where they would be subsidized by property tax dollars instead of liquor revenue.
Yeah, and as much as we'd like revenues in the liquor operation to grow, I think we're seeing kind of, there's only so much growth that we don't know what that is, but I don't expect it to be able to cover the operating losses.
You know, and it also drives one of the discussion we have periodically about what are the impacts for the community if we decide that we're not, Edinburgh Park has got to cover every dime of its operating costs. We might be able to do that, but it would drive some decision making that probably reduces access for a lot of people into Edinburgh Park by raising prices, by doing more direct rentals, things like that. So oftentimes having a greater coverage of operating costs with operating revenues at one of these sites can have a detrimental impact on access, public access to it. Those are oftentimes a trade-off.
So a little background on liquor transfers, the subsidy. Liquor transfers out about 800,000 per year. I'm missing part of it. So about 650 of it go to the park and rec enterprises, and 150 or 100 or so goes to the construction fund. So the liquor profits or the availability to transfer out, it has been at a low point of $650,000 when Total Wine came into the area. But that's what we were last year under the pandemic as well. So it's in recent memory. And then our high was in 2018 at 1.4 million. 2019 was 1.2, and then obviously 2020. The projected cash deficit for the park and rec enterprises would be a loss of 1.2 million in cash every year. So that for the 2022 and 23 budget, that's what we're saying we would need in a liquor subsidy, not to dig into the existing fund balances. Obviously, that sounds a little risky, knowing, we're not sure what liquor can produce, so it's a little risky and unsustainable.
Did you have is it a steady number on the shortfall? Do you expect that to increase over time just based on inflation?
I would expect it to increase over time. And that's what we have seen. I think, the story we've always told is that the liquor subsidizes all of the Park and Rec enterprises. And it's just, yeah, their cost has grown at such a rate that liquor can't do that anymore. The liquor profits haven't grown at the same rate.
And what's,
Go
sorry,
ahead, James.
no, I was just gonna remind me, what's the share of Centennial Lakes of the total for Parks and Rec? I don't know if that was in there or.
It wasn't. I think their annual budget is roughly $1 million.
Well, their net is 500,000 of loss.
How you just looked at this, their park improvement fees are 300-ish.
300,000-ish for the budgeted revenue there.
So park improvement fees around Centennial Lakes Park are a unique funding vehicle that we don't have in any of our other parks, with the exception of Edinburgh Park. But when those parks were built, we had the opportunity at that time to negotiate sort of long-term extra funding from the directly adjoining properties. So they pay their property taxes just like everybody else, but then they pay a small increment on top of that called a park improvement fee, both residential property and commercial property. We collect that and we use that to help put a little more juice into both of those budgets. But those are going away. Those agreements that we made with those property owners associations had sunsets on them. So we have to plan for those to go away.
In what year?
So on this chart, it's,
And we do know, but it's like they're like 18 different associations and they all have slightly different.
Don, is, what's hidden over there on the right side? Is that Centennial Lakes Park?
Yeah.
The both Edinburgh Park and Centennial Lakes Park are losing about 500,000 a year, shortfalling 500,000 a year.
Edinburgh's like, yeah, a little less than that. We're looking at the cash.
Well, which side of the PowerPoint do you want?
Edinburgh's 300,000 to 500,000, and that depends on how much capital is there.
There we go.
There. So the next steps.
So what are the big cost drivers at Edinburgh Park?
I mean, in general, salary benefits is primary cost at all of our locations. I could get you some more details.
Is the pool a factor there?
I mean, the maintenance of that, and again, they built into this budget some probably deferred maintenance. So there are specific things that they're trying to accomplish in repair and maintenance.
That's actually a good example of what I was talking about earlier, Ryan. It's, we did a big analysis on Edinburgh Park 5 or 6 years ago to figure out how we could help turn the fiscal situation around. One was to be more aggressive with that pool and renting it to the swim club. And so we've done that. And one of the collateral impacts of that is that it's less available to people, residents and neighbors that want to just go and swim in it. Because the pool is tied up by kids, swim club kids. We get paid for that. We don't get paid when people just walk over from the apartments or the condos there to swim.
Why does it matter? I mean, it sounds like we're talking about two different things. One is the amount of subsidy or the amount each of these activities loses. And the other is, what bucket are we going to put it in? Why does it matter what bucket if we're going to lose money one way?
And by bucket, you mean general fund or enterprise fund?
Why do we care?
Right, we could make that choice. You could leave it in enterprise fund and it could be a general fund subsidy.
But you're making, I'm trying to get at why you're recommending that we move it from one to the other. I don't understand why Why, what are the benefits of moving it to the general fund as opposed to continuing to?
I might be way too simple on this, but I was interpreting this to mean we would just simply have more control over how it gets funded if it's funded out of the general fund versus having to rely on the liquor sales to generate enough revenue.
Is that right?
That was the way I interpreted.
It's certainly more stable as
Yeah.
a revenue source. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, but, and we had this discussion. So.
Because I asked him the same question.
Yeah, so it loses money. It needs to be subsidized one way or the other. Does it come from, do we stretch the liquor operations or do we do a general fund tax levy and transfer the money back? The net is kind of zero. We talk about adding it to the general fund because when we think about our enterprise operations, Centennial Lakes is, for us, it's more like a park. It's a regional facility, and that's why it would best fit in the parking lot. So that's really it.
I would tell you too, there's some political basis for it as well. It's one thing to take liquor revenues and use that to buy down the price of ice or art center or something like that. It's another to do that with taxpayer dollars and it puts you always vulnerable to the, I'm a taxpayer and I don't like you using my money to spend on in the park or something like that. Or what if it were ice?
Some smaller subset of the community that uses those facilities to those users participating.
I mean, one of the beauties of using liquor revenue for this purpose is that the market area for our liquor stores is comparable to the market area of some of our park and rec facilities. There are a lot of people from outside the community that use our major park and rec enterprises and are same with our liquor too.
So how do you distinguish these two operations at Edinburgh Park and Centennial Lakes? You want to put them in the general fund, but you don't want to have them as enterprises anymore, even though they generate revenue. How do you distinguish them from Braemar Ice Arena or Braemar Field? Why do you suggest leaving some as enterprises and some not? But they seem like they kind of are the same. They're in the same recreational bucket.
We can leave them as an enterprise. It's not required to be an enterprise. An enterprise to me is something that walks and talks a little bit more like a true business. So like our utilities and like our liquor store. If you want the visibility to it, you can certainly leave it as an enterprise fund. I look at Centennial Lakes Park and Edinburgh Park, and I think we named them parks for a reason. And to me, they walk and talk a lot more like our other general fund parks.
So am I missing something? Are we talking about both Edinburgh and Centennial Lakes moving them over or just Centennial
Just
Lakes?
Centennial Lakes now.
Okay, then that makes this more complicated question because if they're both park-like, why aren't we talking about both of them? And then, we get a windfall from the liquor stores, right? If those costs go away from the enterprise fund. I guess that's, I don't understand why one and not the other, if that's the distinction.
Yeah, I think, well, I don't want to speak for Andrea, but Andrea put together a forecast of operations and at what point do they out of cash. So Edinburgh has a little longer lifespan from a cash perspective than Centennial. The challenge is trying to figure out a plan. It really depends on the council. I mean, at this point, we're already looking at a 6.5% increase to the media value. There's a cost to moving these into the general fund.
Yeah.
So if we do things gradually, so Centennial Lakes, this 2-year period, we can work out a plan where the impact is minimal. And then depending on what happens with Edinburgh, again, it's like every 2-year period, take a look at what makes sense to do.
But
Does
it's,
that help?
but it's the same conversation. You're just looking at the forecast and projecting that Centennial Lakes is ahead of forecast, so to speak.
The mayor mentioned earlier, something that I want to go back and talk a little bit more about. When these two parks were established in the late 80s, early 90s, they were established at a time when tax increment practices and law were a lot more permissive and a lot more fun than they are today. And we built an incredible park with this money, right? And there was a lot of money that was put into that project, and some of that money was used to create to essentially kind of a trust fund almost for each one of these facilities. And the idea was you would invest this money. Remember, this is the early 90s. You would invest this money at 7 or 8% maybe, and it would produce all kinds of investment income, and it would never be a burden for the property owners. And it didn't turn out like that. So there's been this initial kind of corpus that was created, and it's been drawn down a little by little. And you've joined the council when it's time to do the day of reckoning on the fiscal side, because the burn rate on that kind of allocated money from the beginning is starting to get closer and closer to zero.
The only thing I would ask is, we're having the conversation today almost solely from a business perspective. So that was a plant that was running, and you showed me the forecast. We looked at the revenue, and then we projected that we're going to lose money. And in our enterprise, there was no way for me to recover that. And the market forces said, get out. I would mothball that facility, right? And so we're almost talking about it in those terms. But you've given a couple of examples of why we wouldn't mothball, because it provides a community benefit. Well, if we raise the revenue to solve the business challenge, then that causes an access issue. And so I think there's some complexities to why we have the park that I would want us to talk through the functionality that we want there, why we want those benefits there, put that on the table. And then if that's, if there are lots of yes check marks for that, then it's, all right, then how are we going to fund that? And then you have the conversation of, here are 3 vehicles we could use to fund it. And then we answer the question that way. And then when you go to the public, you can frame that in that way. But
doesn't keeping it as an enterprise allow for more quantification of that, so we know what that benefit is costing us?
Yeah, I agree. That provides a different level of transparency.
That if we don't have it as an enterprise?
Well, so what I'm saying is we shouldn't make that decision until we have that level of transparency, is what I'm saying.
Okay, I see. So that then even if you're putting it in the general fund, and the public knows, and everybody knows how much it costs us.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, Kyle, correct me if I'm wrong, but benefit now as an enterprise is that, excuse me, it's presented in the CAFR as a separate. And I think we can do the same thing.
Say that again, Don. It does what?
Well, it's presented as a separate fund, so as Councilmember Stanton said, you can see revenues, expenditures for that, for Centennial Lakes exclusively. So we can accomplish the same thing in the general fund, in the Park and Rec department. It just wouldn't be presented separately as a line in the CAFR. So we would still have all that.
Yeah, okay.
So the reason that you take this action today, or that we consider this action today, is the projections that you make on liquor revenues are not necessarily consistent. We see a range here from 750 to 1.3 or 1.3. So, but it could be $1 million next year. It could be 975 next year. In the meantime, Centennial Lakes is pretty consistently at a loss of, we talked about 500, I think I've heard 550 before, but whatever it is. you can say that that's consistent and that continues to probably grow based on expenses allocated to that. So if Centennial Lakes is assigned to the general fund, that allows better latitude in allocation of whatever revenues come out of liquor. We understand that Edinburgh takes up X, but that still leaves an increment above X that is discretionary and pointed in a certain direction, but at least is available as opposed to the lines are crossing. So accurate?
It's true.
Okay.
So if we do have excess revenue from the liquor fund, then we'll have to decide where that goes, right? Or does it automatically feed into the general fund at the end of the year?
Historically, right now it's been sitting in the liquor fund. There's been some talk about moving that to the construction fund.
And that would solve the problem of all the park equipment that needs to be replaced? Or is that street reconstruction? I don't know what construction fund is.
It would help.
Well, maybe not solve the problem, but
Yeah.
Construction fund is our capital improvement fund. It's
Okay.
where it's what funds
Okay.
primarily.
So it's everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And again, it comes down to, we do this 2-year budget process. So it's kind of, okay, let's do it this year, or we can wait a couple of years, let's do it in 2 years. So it's, part of it's just a timing as well.
I think the big picture fiscal impact that we want, that we want to make sure we all know is that the revenue source that we've traditionally used is not growing at the same rate as the operating subsidy is for that facility. And so we're going in opposite directions. So it has to be subsidized from somewhere if we want to keep operating.
I think historically these were operated as enterprises because for the very reason Don was talking about, you wanted to have a separate P&L and a separate balance sheet for every single entity that was involved in these kind of activities that produce revenue. But really, when I think about it, I've thought about it over the years, to me, the only true enterprise we got is a liquor store. Everything else is kind of park and rec. And so to Don's point, I mean, why can't you just track all this stuff within the park and rec budget? It doesn't excuse people from good business practices from trying to make sure that these various enterprises are run as effectively and efficiently as possible. But it gets us out of the situation where we're pretending we got all these separate business operations and it's really just park and rec.
Well,
I mean, if there's a good answer for that, I'm fine. I'm willing to keep talking about all these different enterprises. But
I think I'm not sure if it's a good answer, Jim, but it's just you and me left from 2010, right? And so I remember coming here in 2010 and the council at that point was a lot more interested in operating subsidies and making sure, so it was part of what we set up at that time was a lot more of an emphasis on business practices, business plans, operating subsidies, cost recovery ratios and that sort of thing, because there was a pretty strong interest for that among the council at that time. So, we have a different council today, and if that's taking us in a different direction, we'll go in a different
I
direction.
think Josh Brady is really hot on that.
Joni was too.
Joni, yeah, and of course it begged the question to Josh. Okay, Braemar Ice Arena is operating at 88%. What are you going to do? And it doesn't meet your standards for being at 90 or 92%. Are we going to shut it down?
Right, no.
No.
Ron, no.
No, we're not going to do that.
But
The point is, does it highlight it in a way that puts more pressure on economic efficiency? Not that you're gonna subsidize it, because these are things that the market won't deliver and benefits that our community wants, but what's the best way to set it up to create the greatest economic discipline, I guess?
Right. Because our facility managers are very conscious of their cost recovery. I mean, we compute it, right? There's a formula, we compute it. If the ice arena, it might be, maybe it's 80%. If it's 75%, we talk a lot about it.
It's a
They
metric.
don't want to talk to me. They want to be at their ice arena and get it going. So that's part of it. But we want them to make wise decisions too, because we don't want them to delay needed capital improvements because it's gonna sting. a lot
Right,
of
or
product.
drive the purchase price way up so nobody can afford to use
Right.
it anymore.
But it's good on the
We're
balance sheet.
covering all of
Yeah,
our costs.
That's right.
But how do we do the review of the services that are provided there? And so just in theory, I think the services that are at Centennial Lakes now are the same ones that were there when I was an intern at Cargill 33 years ago. And so there's nothing wrong with that. But are those services, even at a subsidized rate, generating the income that, or the revenue that some other service could be generating to help abate some of this issue? And so when I talk about, if you think about it as an enterprise, just to frame the discussion, you would think about those things. We could do, like, get rid of paddle boating. I'm making this up because that is too expensive. And there are other services that the community might enjoy that are cheaper. And so let's swap this one for that one to help address some of the issue. You're still going to subsidize, but I like to have a more robust discussion, but with all of those factors to just figure out.
It's almost like the analogy is the liquor store. I remember when Josh came in here. You know, that was a big turn and it was born out of a crisis, but he started thinking about different ways to operate that to, now that's more of a straight business to your, but it was a kind of take everything apart, start from the ground up, think about what's the best way to operate that, which is, I think, what you're suggesting in the operation of a park. Why don't we think about, are there other things that might be popular? Maybe we're already doing that.
Yeah.
We do it periodically. I think one of our biggest successes with our golf operation. It was not that many years ago where the golf operation was all below the line too. It was $300,000 or $400,000, $600,000 a year below the line, and now it's flipped. We made massive investments. We had a plan. We made massive investments. We stopped using a particular golf course, a 9-hole course. We stopped. We transferred out, or we contracted out our food operations. We did a lot of things that turned that around, but it was a big capital investment on the city. That was the big thing.
At Centennial Lakes, you might recall that they did recently do that. The lawn games area was underperforming, not used as much by the community. So last year they used part of that to create the Scottish Links. So they,
Bocce ball.
I do think that they're doing that.
And you would think in our general park and rec operation, we're kind of always thinking, we're always trying to figure out what do people want to paddle. And it's a great example.
Another good example of it is Adventure Peak.
Yeah.
Because what we had in there, we were losing quite a bit of money, and then we decided to make a $250,000 investment in creating this kids play area called Adventure Peak, and I think it paid for itself just a few years. We made a smart investment there.
It was.
Scott, if I can go back to a comment you made, and I want to confirm this, we talked about why we have some enterprises. I want to take a look at what the Edina law says again, because in the Edina law, it does single out some operations, liquor operation, and I can't, Kyle, can you remember all the?
Liquor, golf, aquatic center, the arena.
So I think that's part of the reason.
Okay.
So we have a couple of minutes left, and I don't know that we'd like some direction. If it's possible at this point.
How about we don't like 9.9%?
I got it.
How about why does 9.9% in the tax levy increase equals 6.7%? Tax.
On the impact side.
Alicia, when you figured that out.
Is that our wind chill?
It's the wind chill. It is. That's exactly what it
I
is.
understand the wind chill.
And we are gonna figure out the formula.
Life, I have to understand the wind chill.
That's exactly what it is. Is there any other feedback on any of this? So we've had a lot of discussion about the enterprise funds. We'll
I
keep
guess.
talking about that.
Talk at all about the art center. As part of this, and that's not part of the Edina law, I think. And so what the changes are gonna mean for that, kind of perpetual loss. I'd be curious to know more about that.
Okay.
And I think, James, your breakdown of what's happening and what's making money, especially at Centennial Lakes, would be really useful too. Cause that's the big jump. But it's gonna have to happen at some point, I guess, because we're losing those fees gradually that are sort of the neighborhood fees, I think.
I think we start to see those go away in 2030.
Yeah.
Does that sound right?
Okay. And then there's nothing comparable to that to Edinburgh Park, is that correct? Or,
We do have park maintenance fees for Edinburgh.
and are they gonna go away or are they?
Those are, the way the documents are drafted, say perpetual,
They do.
Okay,
so we'll. So
It's a much smaller number.
okay.
Um,
I'm just sitting here thinking that when we did the budget last year, in the middle of, at the front end of COVID, right before COVID, we said that we were gonna go with whatever that was, 6 point some %, which wasn't a reduction. A lot of cities tried to make it easy on people, anticipating they were gonna have a difficult year ahead of them. We said, we're gonna wait and see how things go. And then maybe help people out in the second year because we just didn't know what was gonna happen. But I don't see going from 6 point something to 9 point something helping them out. I mean, the net effect of it may not be any different because we know that the complexities of the Minnesota property tax law, well, it gets allocated to commercial and residential. Adding in the TIF benefit that we got coming back into the budget, it's hard to predict the impact on a home owner. We've made some projections, but they may or may not be accurate. I mean, a third of the people may not even have a tax increase like we had last year. We know that the general fund levy increase was 6 point some %, 5.95. But I feel like we should revisit those notes because I do think that we told folks we would look at that pretty carefully, try to take some pressure off of all. Remember anything about that? That's ring a bell, Bill.
We'll take a look.
I think it was when we were talking about not the reconciliation, but what was the thing that we did when COVID really hit? And
We did a budget reduction and we created a stabilization fund.
I think that was part of that conversation.
Yeah, this would have been last year.
Last year,
Or
something,
at least,
but I was listening to that. So I don't know if you remember that.
I just remember the budget stabilization move. That's,
during COVID.
Yeah, and that, I think was part of that discussion.
And it was part of that discussion. We said next year we'll take a careful look at
Yeah.
property tax. Because we already said it at the end of the year before COVID hit.
the projection, I think at that time was the first year out, which would be last year, was we anticipated stability, but that we could actually take a dip in this year, and it doesn't necessarily appear that we will, although that may not be true on the commercial side as readily built. I think that's what we did for sure talk about that.
And then with the building permits, I know we had a big bump because everybody stayed home and improved their homes. I don't know how much of the budget that is and whether, that dips back down again, what the impact of that is in our projections. I assume you've taken that into account, gone back to normal revenues on that.
Yeah, so we always budget fairly conservatively on building permits because they are variable.
Okay.
Last year was a record year for us with all of the multifamily construction and so on. I haven't looked at where we stand this year yet, but do you have any?
We're working on rolling out the second quarter.
Okay, but it's
close.
projected really conservative. Okay,
Isn't that supposed to be a wash? roughly?
Theoretically, it's not a wash here.
We've had a budget surplus most years.
But on the building permit side, you know, the rule that there should be a nexus between what we charge and what we collect, or what the cost of the
Right.
service is and what we charge for it. The building side's hard to do because we gotta have all those people here ready to receive a project, whether there's projects coming in the door or not. So that's what we report our numbers. It's not illegal to take in more than you spend.
It's supposed to be roughly.
Roughly.
Over time. So we should adjust if we see trends.
Yeah. We did an exhaustive adjustment, I'm thinking either last year or the year before, where Don took apart and figured out what percentage of his time is included in it, me, Lisa Schaefer, even people that are peripherally involved in that process. But yeah, it's a politically sensitive number, so
And
we
it
pay
should
attention to
be
it.
part of a revenue generating strategy.
Yeah, we do not think of it that way. Swear.
So, overall, I think we're gonna have to move something into the general fund or else get out of the general fund subsidy money for the enterprises, start budgeting that. And I guess I'd like to see, a projection if we would have to start instead of the money going one direction, we start going the other direction. That's where I'm at, but I
Well,
think,
Yeah, historically, the rule of thumb was, as I recall, you could consider $300,000 to equal 1% general levy, general fund increase.
It's now up to 420.
Now it's what, 420,000. Thanks, Scott. Good to have back your money.
I still can't understand the significance, and I'm with James about whatever. We should create whatever helps us most effectively manage both the quality and the efficiency of the operations. I don't care whether that means it's an enterprise general tracking it absent the dynamo markets. It may be something that only finance people can.
Does that, if there were a change, does that change the line of reporting or responsibility? I mean, all the people that run enterprises now report to you, or they report to some other director or a director?
No, I wouldn't change their reporting relationships at all.
No.
Just how their budgets are depicted in our financial audits and budgets, more or less.
Still, everybody would report to Harry and Tiffany.
Yeah, you wouldn't be loading Perry up
No,
more than he could bear.
he already has,
Yeah.
and no more. All right, we appreciate.
Okay,
this.
all right, yeah, you want us to have a little extra time to go
Yeah.
upstairs and
It's
get
been
situated?
a while. Just check your seats, make sure they're the right height, and make sure your microphone works.
Okay, all right, we stand adjourned.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So much for the retreat summary.
Right.
Yeah.